Hello, I'm Marcus Railton, and this is the ScotsCare podcast. ScotsCare is the only charity dedicated to helping disadvantaged Scots in London through a range of support, including mental health therapy, financial grants, advocacy, sheltered housing for older Scots, job coaching, social events, befriending, and support for children and families. The charity's been running for 400 years to help break the cycle of poverty experienced by some Scots in London. In this series of the ScotsCare podcast, I'll be chatting to celebrities and supporters of the charity that have forged a life often away from Scotland and about the ups and downs that can bring. Russell Wardrop is my guest today. 22 years ago, he started a company called Kissing with Confidence, teaching professionals and businesses how to sell. In that time, he has trained over 50,000 people. His company works with 40% of the UK's largest law firms, the biggest management consultancy in the world, and he's regularly dealing in business pitches worth hundreds of millions of pounds. Today will no doubt be a lesson for me about the sharp end of business.
ScotsCare, for Scots in London in need of support, financial, practical or emotional help.
Hi Russell.
Hello there, Marcus.
You are the first Wardrop I've ever met. I've never heard of that surname. Have you ever looked into it?
Well, in a little bit, a couple of interesting stories. There's a Wardrop Street in Paisley. It may have been named after a famous Wardrop in Paisley who was a lawyer. Actually, there's some Wardrop twins that are swimmers. But the most interesting thing is my son Matthew lives in a place called Dunlop, and there are about 20 Wardrops in the small Dunlop cemetery. It's the most common name in that. It's quite spooky, and most of them are my relatives. They're farmers from Ayrshire. And as I say, if you go to Dunlop Cemetery, a tiny little Scots Presbyterian cemetery, there are about 20 Wardrops in amongst the 400 or 500 graves, which is quite an interesting little tidbit. So that's farmers from Ayrshire is where my precedents come from, my ancestors come from.
Have you ever done one of those DNA things? My wife got me that as a birthday present a couple of years ago, which was a kind of odd birthday present, but she got one for both of us, 23andMe, and we tested her DNA, and she was really interested. She comes from a Jewish family, and she had what's it called? Ashkenazi Jews, and a bit of Moroccan and a little bit of Arabic and some interest in European. And I was pretty boring, to be honest. I was Scots, and a bit of Scandinavian.
I'm Scots, Irish, I think. I mean, that's as pretty much it. And as far back as my father's side go, it is west of Scotland, Scottish, and I've got farmer in my bones.
Yeah,
I've still got 4 chickens out the back garden. I've got farmer in my bones, I think, for centuries. Up at 5 o'clock in the morning, like the dark, like the cold, don't like the heat. I'm not white, I'm blue. You know, that's if you look at my colouring, I don't do tan, and that's pretty much what's been the past number of 100 years for the Wardrops, I think.
So were you brought up in Paisley?
I'm a West of Scotland boy. I was brought up in Eaglesome, wee village in the south side that we went to school in Paisley. My dad had a business in Paisley, actually, a very successful industrial waste business. And actually, what do they say? The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I now live in Brookfield. I'm an architect by profession. My last architectural project was building my own house in Brookfield, which is just...
Is that kind of near Linwood or Johnson?
Johnson, Linwood, Bridge of Weir. It's kind of in the middle of those three places. So I bought a garden and built a house 10 years ago in Brookfield. So I know Paisley well, and yes, I'm a Glasgow South Sider. I have been all my life.
So explain to me what your business does for other businesses, just for anyone listening, because this is what enticed me to get you on the podcast.
Yeah, we started a business. My partner and I, and now my wife, Sharon McClellan, called Kissing with Confidence 22 years ago. We started teaching presentation skills, pitching skills, essentially. To give you an indication of that, the last bit of pitching I did, and the next bit of pitching I'm going to do is for a construction business here in the centre of London for projects worth about £200 million. And if they win these projects, that'll be £1 billion in contracts we've helped them win in the past 5 years. So we now work in very big pitches. Our big programme is the Rainmaker programme. We essentially teach professionals how to sell. That's it. So 40% of our work is in the law. So we create rainmakers. That's what we do.
But what is it odds? Because I follow you on social media, and I don't know if you'd agree with me, but I think your humanity comes out in every single post. And what you've just told me sounds like Wall Street, sounds like Gordon Gekko, and that sounds like the antithesis of Russell Wardrop.
Well, I think I'm kinder than I appear, and I don't want you to get me crying in the first 5 minutes, Marcus. But funnily enough, one of my colleagues did an interesting little exercise, and she asked all of us to give 3 adjectives about her. So after I gave her the 3 adjectives, I asked her to give 3 adjectives about me. And one of them was kind of leadershipy and being assertive and being the kind of, the man out front, that kind of idea. I can't remember what the second one was. It might have been humor, but the third one was kind.
Okay.
And I was quite taken aback by that. But I do believe I'm low in empathy, but I am a kind person, I think. But you're absolutely right about the corporate environment. I mean, I think the thing about business is if you're going to be in consultancy of any stripe, unless you want to be a poor consultant, you have to go where the money is. So where the money is, I'm sitting here in a hotel in Holborn overlooking the city. I'm here for a month. Month. It's great. And I can look over a lot of my clients. And we go where the money is. So we work with big corporates, 40% in the big law firms. And my next bit of business, funnily enough, is with the largest management consultancy in the world, who is our biggest client.
But you know what you do is you seem to cut through the BS. There's an honesty to your approach, because when I read your posts and you're talking about, big clients, but you say stuff like, I was in my hotel room and I was trying to prop up my whiteboard and I used a pair of trousers and a biscuit tin. And so you're not trying to create this Insta life, this Facebook-tastic bullshit. Well,
I think that what's interesting about what you're saying about that, I mean, I would say at a very surface level, what I'm demonstrating there is humor as well as humanity. So you could call it humor or humanity. And there's no question that if you think of all the best, I nearly said leaders there, but my thing is oratory and public speaking. So, Kissing with Confidence, I've trained 50,000 people in the Kissing with Confidence method, and I've trained 25,000 of them. So I work with individuals and make them better keynote speakers, platform speakers. And I can look right into your soul when you do that. And I would say to you, if you think of any effective leader or good speaker, let's narrow it to good speaker, there isn't an effective speaker that hasn't got humor in them. So I think that humor is, what is it that Churchill said, a joke's a very serious thing. So if you can make people laugh, which is an involuntary thing, in other words, you can't tickle yourself and make yourself laugh. You can't, you laugh because of juxtaposition, because someone says something that surprises you. So what I try and do in those joy posts is 2 things. First of all, make people laugh or smile or be interested in them so they read them again. But second, to have a little bit of a moral to it.
Yeah.
So that last post you reckon there, and it's sitting behind us here, is we do work at a high-end corporate. The people I was working with yesterday are directors in a fairly significant business. And we've got a fantastic Wonderwall, Marcus. Yeah, it's very high-tech. But I've also got a kid's flip chart behind me because I don't have my whiteboard at home. So that juxtaposition, I think, makes me a human being, a real person, and not some kind of corporate entity.
ScotsCare, helping to break the cycle of deprivation for Scots in London.
Did you see the world of business change after COVID? Did employees want something different from their lives and their business world?
Well, I'll come on to employees in a little minute, but I can tell you that, in fact, in this very hotel, I came down to this very hotel 2.5 years ago, one Monday in March, with a full diary. And by that evening, we were in lockdown. Yeah. And I tried to go home on the Tuesday morning, and flights from City Airport were £750.
Wow. So
I got the train back north and my diary got wiped, and £100,000 came out of our diary 2 years ago, last April. And another £500,000 came out in the next 6 weeks. And our business was done, Marcus. Forget humans for a minute in the broader society. We had done for 20 years. Every single penny we had earned was physically standing in front of a group of people delivering training to them. And I mean every penny. and we had nothing because we weren't allowed out the house. And Zoom saved our bacon. And we're now a global business. So that's the first thing I would say, that people talk about business pivoting, Marcus. Our business didn't pivot. We didn't have a business for 6 weeks. Yeah. A couple of lessons, I suppose, that we learned about people. We didn't have a business. And I said to our guys, as I suppose the boss, look, go and get another job, folks, because the NHS is hiring. Amazon's hiring. They need delivery drivers because we're a training business. I don't know what's going to happen. And nobody left, which was just fantastic. And come September, we thought this Zoom thing might be possible. And I said, right, we're going to go for it. We put everything on the table. We put all our chips on the table, thought we'll risk it. And we're now a global business because Zoom's fantastic. But here's the interesting thing about people, Marcus. Have you heard the phrase, culture eats strategy for breakfast?
No.
So that's one from Tom Peters. And I always thought it was quite trite. In other words, be nice to your people and culture eats strategy for breakfast. It never became truer after lockdown, because if you're a poor culture in your organization, you were toast. In other words, if the people weren't all on the bus. So nobody left our business. And I do think culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I think one of the big things that's come out of lockdown is that if you're too much of a hard ass, and if you drive your people too much, even if you give them lots of money, people are looking for a whole range of things now.
Yeah.
Other than just the work and the money. And funnily enough, we preempted all the stuff that we're doing. We went to a 4.5-day week a year ago, and we sorted everybody's wages out in Kissing with Confidence about 6 months ago, because we saw inflation was coming hard at us. Now, that doesn't mean that nobody's going to leave our business, but it does mean that one thing that Sean and I are passionate about is, and it sounds, I always think it trite when I say it, is doing the right thing and people enjoying working with us and being able to pay the bills. What gives me great pleasure is that I see people in our business, Marcus, who started off maybe 3 rungs down, and their wages are now doubled over a few years, and they're buying houses, they're buying cars, they're having kids, they're getting on with their lives. And part of that is because Sharon and I started a business 20 odd years ago and get big money from corporates in London to haul back up to Scotland to pay everybody's bills. That gives me a huge amount of pleasure. And of course, helping clients win big pitches and becoming better at selling.
And do you think employees won't tolerate this kind of Glengarry, Glen Ross type of throw people under the bus type attitude anymore? Well, here's one for you but we can have a debate about this if you like. I think we might have reached peak that, the Great Leave and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I mentioned to you, I'm a bit of a stoic. Yeah.
Things can change very quickly, Marcus. And why you need to embrace stoicism, which is about acceptance and purpose and stuff like that, is that right now it's an employee's game. Right now there's a recruitment crisis. But if our big recession hits, and if things happen in Taiwan or out in Russia or Ukraine or something like that, you're old enough to know, or you look old enough to know, and you know what a recession is, Marcus. Yeah. I remember back in the last crash when I bought a house and interest rates were 5%. Yeah. So for me, I think that employers, the biggest change for me has been that home working has meant you've had to be able to trust the people that work in your business to be working remotely from the office. Yeah.
Yes.
Now, the funny thing, a lot of the businesses I've been working with for the past 15 years, a consultant and a management consultant spends most of their time away from the office, not being looked on. Yeah. So I think the biggest change is that you have to be able to be self-actualized and a self-starter as an employee, because employers still want you to be an effective worker, but employers must trust the people who work in the organization, and teams must trust one another, because you're not eyeballing them the whole time and seeing that Jim's off for a half-hour coffee again today, or Sandra spends 15 minutes, 20 minutes extra at lunch, that kind of stuff. I've never cared about people doing 9 to 5. I've cared about the results at Kissing with Confidence. We've always had a flexible approach to work.
Yeah.
Flexibility, Marcus, as a business owner, means you are flexible enough to work 60 hours a week.
So what do you think, Russell, made you? Did you have jobs as a teenager? Because I when I was a kid, I had a paper round, then I had a potato round.
Yeah.
and then I worked in B&Q in the gardening department.
Where was this, Marcus? Where was this?
This is in Clydebank.
Right. So I'm just over the other side of the river from you. I'm probably a little bit older than you, but every job I've had has been the best job I've had. But I was a waiter in a posh restaurant between the ages of 14 and 17. It was called the Pepper Pot at Eaglesome.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And I learned to do silver service and table cooking. And I can still cook because I was cooking steak Dianes and beef stroganoffs and crepe Suzettes for people when I was 15 on a wee gas burner at the end of a table, and they were paying the equivalent of 50 quid a pop for it. Now, and a very brief, funny story. The first thing you learn to cook at the tables is crepe Suzette, because it's only pancakes and orange syrup, yeah?
Yeah.
But you have to flambe it at the end, yeah? Which basically means getting a glass of brandy, heating up the pan, fling the brandy in, and you get the flames, and all the people go, oh, that's fantastic. Well, I'm getting told how to do this. I've got the glass of brandy and I'm heated up the pan and I chuck the brandy into the pan, except I missed the pan. And basically it goes beyond the pan and onto the table, but of course it caught fire in its way across. So my first introduction to table cooking was a flaming river going down the middle of the table.
Cooking the actual table.
I love that. And, split shifts, 10 till 3, 6 till 12. 5 days a week, 80 quid a week when I was 16 years old. I love having that money in my pocket. I then delivered toilet rolls and janitorial supplies from my dad's business during the summer, and cash in my hand, loved it. And also my dad was an industrial waste guy, so he's always up at 5 a.m. He worked from 6 till 6, 5 days a week. He went in for half a shift on a Saturday. Used to take me to my football in Paisley because it was the only way to get there in the morning. Used to be in at 6. So where I've come from, Marcus, is you get up early, earlier than you think you should, and you stay a bit later than you'd like.
Yeah.
That's where I've come from. I love working.
One of the reasons I asked you about what you did as a teenager, because a lot of LinkedIn, the social media platform, I don't engage with because I think it's nonsense. But one of the things I read is that teenagers these days are less likely to have part-time work. I don't know why it didn't say that. And it says, as a result, they can become more disengaged from their employers. And when I look at a lot of young people's profiles, you'll see I stayed 8 months here, a year here, 18 months here. You don't get the 5 years here, 6 years. Do you think we have to treat young people differently?
Well, I think that, you got to be careful you don't rant. I've got to be careful I don't rant about this, and I wouldn't do that. But what I think, this takes me back to the stoicism thing. And let's talk purpose. If you're going to throw the duvet back in the morning, you have to find purpose. Now, I've turned a hobby into a job. I used to do debating, a bit of after dinner speaking. I used to train people in wee speeches for free through Junior Chamber International. I used to do it as a hobby. So I've turned a hobby into a job. Yeah. And what I say to any young person, and basically everybody's younger than me, if they ask any career advice, I say, focus. Find something you're tolerably good at and that you quite like to do. You don't have to love it and you don't have to be brilliant at it. And face the wall and get brilliant at it. One of my favorite, there's a guy called Stephen Bartlett that does podcasts. I don't know if you've listened.
Yeah, I know the guy you mean. Yep.
I love them. And my favorite podcast of all the ones is not all the famous people. It's a guy called Will Storr. And I'd never heard of him. I've now bought a couple of his books. And he was asked for his best piece of advice for kids. And he said, don't tell your daughter she's Beyonce. And I thought that was brilliant, because your daughter's got 2 left feet and she can't sing a note. She's not going to be Beyonce. And even if you can dance and sing a little bit, she probably isn't either. So in other words, I wanted to play for Arsenal and Dundee United probably when I was younger, because I supported these teams, but I wasn't good enough at football. So what I say to anyone who wants to have fulfillment, forget happiness. The happiness industry is the biggest con out, because seeking happiness is like seeking the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow when you should be looking at the colours. Life is about purpose. And if you can find that focus that gets you up in the morning and gets you going in the morning, gets you up out of bed, you will then find contentment in the sacrifice you make for that purpose. And you might get, Marcus, once or twice during the week, or once or twice a day if you're lucky. You might get a little bit of joy. And that's as simple as 186 calorie bag of Maltesers and a cup of hotel coffee. I can be happy in the biggest city in the world for 69 pence. So find purpose and you will gain contentment. And once you've nailed that, your life will be jeweled with joy if you're lucky. And you'll also be able to cope with any of the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune that are flung at you. And that is life. That is life. That is the penalty we pay for being alive, Marcus, is suffering and death. That's what we all get. But if you can find your purpose, you will bear sacrifices and you will get contentment. And out of that will come joy. And nobody teaches anyone that these days.
No, I agree.
We're all taught we're entitled to happiness for some reason. Why are you entitled to happiness? What's happiness?
This is the purpose versus ambition thing, isn't it? Yeah. And I think my kids, and I worry about my kids because they watch a lot of nonsense on YouTube. And as I can be a YouTuber, I can have 60 billion subscribers, and I have to constantly say to both of my boys, you have to have a reality check. This is, and this brings me to your catchphrase: find purpose, gain contentment. And when I first read it, I thought, this isn't new. If you read what Plato or Socrates were writing 2,000 years ago, it was about get one thing that you're good at.
Well, this is Stoicism. This is Stoicism. And the other thing about Stoicism, and it's the Derren Brown's Happy book is the best exponent of it. You want to have a look at Derren Brown's book called Happy, and his other books, actually. I'm reading Stoicism and the Art of Happiness now. And it's interesting. It is an ancient art. But the reason that it will come back is that it does come back when times get a bit harder, because you don't think of the higher level things, the new car, the fancy restaurants or whatever it might be when you're having a hard time. So this isn't to decry. I mean, we have never been wealthier as human beings. There's one of my favorite books just now I'm reading is called Superabundance, and it gives you statistics that everything is better than it was before. And I think what's interesting about the happiness thing is for some reason we don't seem to feel that. But that's because for my money, we're chasing the wrong things. We're all trying to be Beyonce, to use a metaphor. So I do think that the Stoicism thing has got a whole range of things to it. And what the Stoics will tell you, or what practicing Stoics will tell you, is just like you have to physically exercise your body to lose weight or get a little bit more trim so you can fit into your clothes. It's kind of like exercising your mind.
ScotsCare, supporting Scots away from home in London.
One of my favourite aspects of it, and I've touched on it a couple of times in the Joy posts, is negative visualization.
Yeah, now that I was going to ask you about that. Use negative visualization for inspiring positive action. And do you know what that reminded me of, Russell? There's a quote by Roger McGough, the poet. He says, "Every day I think about dying, about disease, starvation, violence, terrorism, war, the end of the world." It helps keep my mind off things.
Well, here's what I love that. And I'm going to look up Roger McGough after this podcast. But here's the interesting thing, a very practical reason, because people think it's morbid to do negative visualization, but I'll not describe it as well as, say, a Seneca or an Epictetus did. But here's what they say is, or Marcus Aurelius, here's what they say is, imagine the worst things every day that could happen to your wife, your kids, your business. Imagine everything was taken away from you. And here's the reason you do that, Marcus. The first reason you do that is because that kind of thing sometimes happens to people. And so that you will be prepared for it and it will not kill you when it happens. Yeah, first reason. But here's the kicker. Here's the second reason. If you imagine your children not being able to see your children again, or not being able to see your partner again, or your business going south, it makes you appreciate it all the more that you have these things. So when you're in the moment with them, it makes you feel the joy of being able to see your grandchild or your child or your wife, or making sure your business is all right. So it's not about being morbid. It's not about being depressed about it. It's about preparing for the worst, which also allows you to appreciate the things you have, because everything goes in the end. None of us are immortal.
But, Russell, it's a bit of an existential mind bomb to get your head round every day, is it not?
Well, it is. And the funny thing is, we had a brief chat about this before we started the recording, Marcus. I have spent the past couple of years, you mentioned YouTube. I listen to a lot of a historian called Will Durant on YouTube, and it's a guy called Rocky who does he's a fantastic narrator. And he does everything from the Renaissance to the history of China to the history of India to all the philosophers. Now, I go to sleep with it and I generally don't hear all of it.
Yeah.
But what it does is it puts the modern world in proper historical context. And without being too blunt about it, pandemics and wars are nothing new. You don't even have to look very far back, and they actually happen within living memory. So in other words, why should we be surprised by any of this? And we should be, well, as a society, we should be prepared for it, but we should certainly be personally prepared for the inevitable disappointments of life. But a lot of the narrative these days is you have to be happy all the time,
yes,
which I think makes people miserable. Can I just tell you a little secret, Marcus? I know nobody else is listening. I'm actually the happiest person in the world. It's true. It's true.
Let me ask you one thing. We'll kind of run out of time, but before we end, I want to actually ask you about failure and resilience and equipping yourself with the right tools, which you've also spoken about, and how important is that? Because ultimately, as you said, without failure, you can't have success. We're going to fail at least 10 times a day just to get through life. So what kind of tools do you have to equip yourself with to pick yourself up and get on with it?
So that's resilience. So I like to teach a little bit about resilience, and I put the word quit and don't quit up in a flip chart. I'll say 3 things about this, right? Quit and don't quit. And I put the word don't quit up first. I say, that's what resilient people do. They don't quit. Is that right? And everybody goes, yeah. And then I put the word quit up. I said, but here's what resilient people could do. They quit. There's a big pause. I say, yeah, they quit doing the shit, the busy work, the nonsense work. So that's the first thing I'll say about resilience. But let me say about failure in terms of business, in terms of personally. I regularly put myself in front of hundreds of people for up to 3 hours with a flip chart and a pen. Yeah. And there's a little voice inside my head before I start, Marcus, up the back, the wee Glaswegian guy saying, you're going to bomb today, wee man. You're shite at this.
He's in my head as well.
Yeah. Right. So let me give you a cast iron guarantee. I will bomb again. The worst I ever bombed, Marcus, was at the biggest burn supper in the world, the Bridgetown Burns Club. I was the last speaker on, and I had 10 minutes. And I bombed so badly, the taxi drivers in Glasgow were talking about it on the Monday morning.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm still doing it every single bloody day. So what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah.
First thing. So that's the personal thing about failure. Let me talk a little bit about business and failure. The financial crash and the COVID situation were existential crises for our business. Both times we were advised by really well-known people that we knew, business people, you could just chuck it because it's not a business to be in. It's a discretionary business. In fact, with the COVID crisis, our chairman said, why don't you just stop and take all the money out of the bank and get everybody other jobs? Because you could just chuck it now anyway. You've got enough money. Yeah. So let me tell you what came out of the financial crisis. When everything stopped for us, that's when we started teaching selling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because we thought nobody's doing presentation skills now. We would not be teaching selling without the financial crisis, Marcus. We wouldn't. It's our biggest seller. It's our biggest moneymaker now. Yeah. COVID. Everything we were doing was in the room before COVID. And now 70% of our stuff is on the Zoom. Let me tell you about our last Art of Storytelling course. It was delivered to people in India, China, mainland Europe, and America, all at the same time from my front room in Brookfield. That's a massive game changer for us. So in terms of failure, it's truly the case that when change is imposed upon you, when you are stress tested, here's the great thing about human beings. We don't give up. We become innovative. We think stuff through. And I'm certainly, my background's architecture, so I'm the big picture guy who thinks, I'm the big right brain guy that says, okay, this is how we've been doing it. How can we do it differently? How can we do it differently? So what I think about failure is inevitable if you put yourself out there. And there's no more putting yourself out there than physically standing in front of an audience. Yeah? But more strategically in our business, the 2 massive failures that nearly killed our business in 20 years, the 2 big ones, the financial crash and COVID, in hindsight, they were the best things that ever happened to our business. because we could still be delivering presentation skills in Scotland if it hadn't been for the financial crash and for COVID.
I mean, that is a kind of brilliant irony. And when you come home at the end of the day, you've got a good support network because you're also working with family. You're working with your son, Matt, and with your wife, Sharon.
Yeah.
And does that give you peace?
Well, I don't know if peace is the word. I certainly don't think if Sharon Matthew would say that was peace. There are pluses and minuses working with your family. Yes. Certainly Sharon and I are like that. We've got one another's backs, and that can be hugely, I think comforting was the word I was looking for there. The disbenefits of that is that you maybe fence yourselves a little bit, and it means that other people don't get to penetrate the ideas generation might suffer a little bit because of that. But there's no question that having a solid foundation in your business is one of the reasons you last 22 years. And you don't, because lots of, especially small consultancies, there are very, very few that last a significant amount of time, or with employees, because a lot of them are kind of one-man practices. So there's no question it's hugely beneficial. You got to trust the people that you work with.
Russell, it's been great chatting to you today. I really enjoyed it, and I've learned a lot, actually. Thank you. You just send me your invoice. It's
been a real pleasure, Marcus, speaking to you, and I look forward to let us know when it goes up on your podcast, and I'll let some people listen to it.
Brilliant. Speak to you again soon.
Nice to speak to you.
ScotsCare, supporting London Scots with financial grants, welfare advice, counselling, sheltered housing, jobs coaching and family support.